seems to be a recognition across countries that global problems need collective solutions. We heard that in many of the presentations today as well. There is a recognized need for multilateralism because multilateralism is an instrument that can help us achieve these goals. And yet, we find multilateralism in facing serious challenges. Why is that the case? Is it because multilateralism has failed to serve its purpose for individual countries, for individual actors? Or is it that the world has changed so dramatically that our old institutions are no longer fit for purpose? Or is it this Westlessness that we have been discussing today? Or is it something entirely different? Dr. Jaishankar, why don't I start with you? Please.
Thank you. First of all, let me say it's a great pleasure to be here. Let me look at the two key concepts you mentioned, multilateralism and Westlessness. Now, I think clearly multilateralism has become weaker, and clearly Westlessness is in evidence. And I would suggest that there is a correlation between the two. It's not to say that multilateralism is solely dependent on the West, or the West has always been faithfully multilateral. I think it is not. But there is a relationship. So what has led to weaker multilateralism and Westlessness? I think the first point is we've seen in the last 20, 30 years economic rebalancing in the world. It was a question of time before economic rebalancing translated into political rebalancing. And we are seeing that. I mean, in 2008, G7, G8 became G20. I think that's the beginning of an era. It's not the last word. So if there's going to be political rebalancing, then clearly we are going to be in a transition era. The second is that there is no question the world is more nationalistic. It's more nationalistic. The United States is more nationalistic. China is more nationalistic. Different countries in the world are. A lot of this nationalism has been electorally validated. And there are multiple reasons. I mean, there are countries where it's a sort of positive, assertive nationalism. In some cases, it's more insecure nationalism. But the fact a more nationalistic world obviously is a less multilateral world. The third is the West, which was, in a sense, the old order. I would say if you talk of Westlessness, there is a Westfulness, and no pun intended. But that era, I think the West was so sure that it would sort of extend into infinity, that it actually didn't cultivate broader constituencies of support in the rest of the world. And so when political rebalancing happened, I think today you can see the gaps, in a sense, and I say this, say between the West and the South. And bear in mind that large parts of the global South are actually democratic, and most of all, beginning with my country. So even though they share a lot of political values and beliefs, yet there is a very visible gap between the West and the South. To some extent, there's the dichotomy of interests and beliefs. A lot of countries didn't practice what they preached. So what happened was, when it came to multilateralism, the exceptions were so many over such a long period of time that I think the rules got weakened. And of course, it didn't help that the United Nations is far less credible than it has been in history, which of course is not entirely surprising, because when you think about it, in your daily life, there aren't too many things which are 75 years old and still as good as they were. So clearly there's something which needs to be done there. A lot of new challenges that the world faces, challenges of technology which were discussed, challenges of connectivity. I think these are not readily amenable to multilateral solutions. These are also less influenced by the West. So the wastefulness factor kicks in, westlessness factor kicks in there as well. So I think all of these have been trends which have reinforced each other over a period of time. So we come to the other issue raised, so what do you do about it? I think for the West, if it is going to be less dominant in the world, you do what you do in politics. You create coalitions. You look for convergences. So if the multilateral system is not working well enough, you support it with plurilateral arrangements. You make new compacts. So I think those are, and those could be political, those could be security. Burden sharing has a specification in this geography, but I think it's frankly a practical concept today in the world. I think issues like counterterrorism, maritime security are issues where there is need for greater global burden sharing. I would also say one of the challenges which the West will face is how to get out of the alliance mindset. I mean, it's the business of the West to mind its alliances. I'm not disputing that. But I think the reality of this new world is Western countries have to look beyond alliances and work with partners beyond alliances who will come from a different place with a different history. So how do you develop the mechanisms to work with such countries? So to sum up, really, I would say if you are looking at a more multipolar world, then clearly, how do you, to me, it's important that, and a multipolar world is a westless world. It's important that a multipolar world requires actually more, not less multilateralism, so that there is greater stability, because at the end of the day, when we all speak about global rebalancing, what we don't want is imbalancing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jaishankar.